You're now into the Mothman Podcast, your number one source for sci-fi and paranormal podcast. Hey girls, we've got company. Good evening and welcome to another October, almost Halloween Mothman Podcast. Tonight we decided we would share with you some of the local ghost stories because we all like ghost stories here at Halloween. And so we'll be starting out. But in the studio with me, I just want to shout out hello to Amanda.
Hi, I'm here tonight.
And Bruce.
Hey guys, I'm here.
We'll be, like I said, we're going to be talking about some ghost stories that you can sit around and listen to when you're working or out there in the car and you want to listen to something besides music. We hope you tune into our podcast. So the first one tonight I'm going to start off with was all started when these two college students, and you know I have granddaughters and grandsons that are all in college now, so you think about this sort of thing. But we'll call one of them Mary and one of them Jane. Mary Jane, right? So Mary and Jane were both in her science class, and the science teacher decided he's going to have a big exam the next day, and so he reminds all the students to make sure that you study and be ready for this exam. Well, Mary and Jane are very close, and so Jane gets this invite to a party that night from this really good-looking guy. So she invites Mary. He said, "Come on, let's go to this party." "No, I'm staying home and studying." She says, "No, you need to come to this party." She said, "No, I'm going to stay home and study. I want to make good on this grade." So, Jane tried to get Mary to go, but Mary decided, no, she's not going to go. So Jane just gave in and says, "Okay, I'm going to the party." So Jane gets ready and spends all afternoon getting ready, and Mary's there studying all evening. And so she finally goes out with her boyfriend and has the time of her life. So she's come back in. It's pretty late, about midnight, and so she opens the door and she decides, well, I'm not going to wake Mary up, so I'm going to just go to bed and I'll get up and cram the next morning. So Jane goes over and gets in her bed and goes to sleep. And so she wakes up the next morning and she sees Mary laying over there, and she was on her stomach. So she goes over and she looks like she's sound asleep. So she's trying to wake Mary up, and so she finally rolls Mary over and sees this terrible expression on her face, and you could knife and blood everywhere. All of her study material was still out, and there's blood everywhere. And so it just freaks Jane out. So Jane just falls to the floor and kind of almost passing out. And she looks up and on the wall, and she says, and she reads in Mary's blood, "Hey, aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?"
Oh my God!
So remember that when you're out.
He was still in the room.
He was still in the room.
Oh my God.
So that's my first one, guys.
That's like everybody's nightmare is having someone in your home who's not supposed to be there.
Yeah. Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights? Okay.
That's a creepy one.
Okay, Amanda, it's your
I've got
turn.
one that this actually happened to me. It was kind of a long-term haunting, and probably the only haunting where I've actually been terrified. I got married back in 2003 to a guy who lived in California, and we moved to Hollywood together. And most of the apartment buildings there are pretty old. I don't know how old this one was, but it was tiny and very old. Like the paint was, 7 or 8 layers deep. It was a sunny little apartment and seemed kind of nice. It was really small. It was all we could afford at the time. And I wasn't working. I had just graduated from college and just moved to California, so I was looking for a job. and kind of doing the housewife thing. You know, I'd bake cookies, and, you know, I was all into that at first. And it started pretty much right away when my husband would leave for work. I would just get this really uneasy feeling about the hallway. There was a living room with a kitchen next to it, and then this really short hallway, and then the bedroom to the left and the bathroom to the right. And for some reason, that hallway it was just really scary. So what would end up happening is wherever he left me, if he left when I was in the bedroom or if he left when I was in the living room, I could not walk down that hallway for the entire day. And I would be stuck for 8 hours until he got home because I was so terrified of that hallway for some reason. It just was this foreboding, scary feeling, and I couldn't explain it. And it would increase and increase, and it was almost like the oppression was increasing. And I kept telling him, I said, you know, I am so scared. And he's like, what are you scared of? No one's going to get in here. You know, it's a gated apartment building, and it's really secure. You had to have keys to get into any room. And he's like, would it make you feel better if we went down and got you some mace? And then at least if there were an intruder, you could mace them. And I was like, sure. So we went down to the Army Navy store on Hollywood Boulevard. It's a famous little Army Navy store. And you had to, I couldn't believe it, but in California, you have to have like a permit to buy mace. So we did all of that, took it home. And so I would end up stuck either in the bedroom or the living room, just clutching my mace for the entire day, like finger on the trigger. And it was just getting worse and worse. And then noises started happening. And if I was in the back of the house, the apartment, in the bedroom, I would hear noises coming from the kitchen that would sound like someone was like cooking or something, like pulling out pots and pans and setting a plate down. And I would run to the kitchen, and of course no one's there. And this kept happening, like not every day, but it was at least once a week. And it would happen, you know, during the day when my husband wasn't there. So he didn't believe me. He was like, you know, you're just paranoid. You're kind of bored. You know, maybe we can find you some more activities to do. And then, I remember one night he went to bed early and I was still awake, and I was, cleaning up in the bathroom a little bit, washing the mirror or whatever. And I started hearing all the noises in the kitchen, and it was really loud. And I ran to the bedroom and I was like, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And he was like, I don't hear anything. And it was just really strange. He wasn't experiencing any of it, but I was. One day he had left and I was stuck in the bedroom, and I was on the computer with my back to the door, and it felt like a presence was behind me. You know how you feel like you can feel another human in the room with you. And it felt like that. And I was thinking like, okay, when I turn around, somebody's going to be there, and my mace is across the room. And I turned around real quick and nothing was there. The cat was sitting there. And so I was like, what is going on? Well, we ended up deciding to come back to North Carolina for a few months, and we decided to go ahead and let go of the apartment. And so the last 3 days that we were there, all the furniture had been packed up or moved, and we literally just had a mattress on the floor. And they had a nice heated pool outside. So me and my husband were in the pool, and I said, I have to go pee. And he said, well, go. And I was like, but I don't want to go by myself. And he's like, oh, come on. It's 3 doors down. It's just right there. There's no reason for you not to go. You can do this. Come on, go to the bathroom. So he talked me into it, and I went into the apartment, locked the door behind me, and I went into the bathroom, and I was literally mid-pee when I heard all of this noise in the kitchen. And there were no pots and pans or anything left. We had packed everything. And in fact, the truckers had already come and picked everything up. And I heard it sounded like someone had just dumped pots and pans, broken plates, everything onto the floor, like it was chaos. And this went on for about 2 or 3 minutes. And all I could think was, someone's in the apartment. Someone's in here. And what am I going to do? So I grabbed a can of hairspray and a lighter. And I was like, well, I'll make my own blowtorch and I will just blow them in the face. And so I creep out nothing in the kitchen. And I was like, man, I'm so glad to be out of this apartment. We've only got one more day here. And I was like, okay, maybe I am imagining this. And I was walking back to the bathroom to put the hairspray back away. And I hear a lady's voice very audibly say, I just wanted someone to notice me. And I had chills. I dropped the hairspray. I ran out. We slept one more night there and we were gone. And that was probably the scariest experience. Now looking back, I think I would understand it differently. But at the time, I was terrified.
Wow. Well, she just wanted you to notice.
She just wanted me to notice her.
She got your attention too.
She sure did. Yeah. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I was going to wonder, like, what are you going to do with that mace? Are you going to mace the hallway?
I'm telling you, like,
mace herself.
Probably would have hurt myself before anybody else.
I think you just created a mess that you would have to clean up. All right. Well, I got one, and mine's a true ghost story, but it is not one of mine. It is from a user that will remain anonymous, and his story is called Ghost Bro. My house was built in 1904. It is a single-family home, wood frame, setting on a concrete block foundation. I've been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and I have seen or heard in this house, this one event is my favorite. This happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his best friends had started a garage band, and his friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, and they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed because I worked graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement, but the tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall, into the living room, and out in the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking back upstairs when he remembered that he left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back and get it. Now, the basement is not clean with full sight lines. There had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he's about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye, he sees it. It is a shadowy figure right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you were in the presence of a spirit or ghost and you felt a bad vibe, to say a quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically said, hey, F you, I don't have time for this. My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he walked out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open, and the light from the street lamp was flooding into the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last light switch, in the living room went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. Still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the porch steps. He walked toward the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's seat of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, hey, what about your little brother? Isn't he coming with us? My brother answered, what do you mean? He went to work early tonight. He's already gone. Do you see his car anywhere? The next question they asked was, so then who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?
Oh, my God. Oh, wow.
Well, that's one of those things where you want to carry a mirror on your shoulder like you're on a bicycle so you can see behind you all the time.
Would they show up in the mirror?
I don't know. Wow. Okay, that's a good one.
That's a creepy one.
Okay, I've got one that I wanted to share with you. And this took place back in 1975. A young couple, both 18, decided to get married right after high school. The father of the bride lived in Palm Beach in a mansion and was able to afford a big wedding for them. To make a long story short, they got married and the wedding was beautiful. After the wedding, they had a big reception in an old building and everyone got pretty drunk. Been there, done that. When there was only about 20 people left, the groom decided that he wanted to play hide and seek. So everyone agreed, and the groom was it. They all went off to hide, and the game went on. After about 20 minutes, everyone had been found except the bride. Everyone looked everywhere and tore the whole place apart looking for her. After a few hours, the groom was furious, thinking the bride was playing a terrible trick. Eventually, everyone went home. A few weeks later, the groom, having placing a missing persons report with the local police department, gave up looking for her. Heartbroken, he tried to go on with his life. 3 years later, an old woman was cleaning that old house. She happened to be in the attic and saw an old trunk. She dusted it off, and out of curiosity, she opened it. She screamed at the top of her lungs, ran out of the building, and called the police. Apparently, the bride had decided to hide in the trunk for the game of hide and seek.
Oh, no.
When she sat down, the lid fell, knocking her unconscious and locking her inside. She suffocated after a few days or so. When the old woman found her in the trunk, she was rotting, her mouth in the shape of a scream.
Oh, that's so awful. Oh, my God. What a horrible way to go.
Yeah.
And what a horrible way to be found.
Yeah. Can't you imagine this groom thinking what he'd been thinking about his
Wow.
ex-wife? Yeah.
Well, maybe he got lucky and he was on our life insurance policy.
Yeah. Be careful when you're playing hide and seek and go seek. Make sure that you stay in a safe place.
Man, that's frightening, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you always hear about people getting locked in old refrigerators from playing hide and seek.
Yeah, but that's mostly children.
It is. This is not someone who's, like, got plans for her life.
Yeah.
Wow.
She was 18 years old. Passed away.
That's sad. I bet she haunted that house therefore or after.
Man, we could probably still find her there.
Yeah. Well, I've got a short one written in from a lady named Esmeralda. And she said, one night when I was about 10 to 12 years old, I was having trouble falling asleep. My bedroom was the entire top floor of our house with my bed and such being on the left side and storage closets and a play area being on the right. I was lying in bed when I heard a noise from the other side of the room, and I saw my rocking horse begin to rock. It was sitting just outside of one of the storage closets, but it was moving. It proceeded to rock its way halfway across the room and stop dead under the ceiling light. At this point, I was freaking out, and I just buried my head under the blankets, and I didn't peek out again until morning. I eventually fell asleep. It was all confirmed to not be a bad dream, because when I woke up, the rocking horse was still in the middle of my room. Furthermore, I got a stern reprimand from my parents for being up and out of bed playing with my toys well past my bedtime. Their bedroom was directly below the storage closet and play area, and they had heard the creaking and rocking of the horse shuffling across the room half the night. So that's a wonder what was rocking on her horse.
I don't know, but you remember that one episode we did when I was talking about I was a police officer and we went into that church and the rocking chairs were rocking?
Yeah.
So I can imagine, because that minister said, "You don't want to go in that room." I said, "Yeah, let's go in there. We need to check it out." I went in there and the chairs are rocking. He says, "I told you, you didn't want to go in this room." So.
You know how, like, you always hear about churches and schools being haunted, and I always wonder if that's because those people had such a pleasant experience there that that's kind of where they want to spend time.
Well, you know, we don't know why people do what they do.
This is true.
We don't know why spirits do what they do, or the entities, the energy. So, yeah, it could be.
Could have been
one or all of the above. You know? It's, the good feels safe in that location, you know, that sort of thing. But the minister just says, "Hey, this place is haunted," and what can I say? You know, it's the way it is.
You just never know.
That's right. Bruce, you have another one for us?
Yeah, I have another one for us. This one, another true story. This one is called The Crib Shadow. And it goes as follows. I was babysitting my niece once while I was staying at my brother's place. And they had the baby camera set up so I could see her on the little TV it came with. I was studying and started dozing off when I heard some whispering and realized it was coming from the monitor. I initially thought it was some feedback or something, but when I looked at the TV, there was a dark shadow near my niece's crib. I had never been more terrified in my life, but the shadow was clearly there where it had not been before. I ran into my niece's room and looked around, but I saw nothing. So I took her out of there. I went back to the TV, and the shadow was clearly gone. I told my brother what had happened, and he pulled me aside and told me not to mention it to my sister-in-law because she'll freak out, but that he had seen the same thing several times now with the same whispering.
Oh, wow.
They stayed in that house for about 4 more years, and when my niece was just learning to talk, she would tell her mom about her special friend. To this day, it scares me. When they moved out, my brother told me my niece had become inconsolably sad because she missed her friend. Her mom would tell her she could bring him along, but all she would say is that he couldn't leave the house. We have never to this day told her about the shadow, and she apparently never saw it.
Wow, that's a creepy one. You know, we were talking about before how with digital equipment, it seems like whatever this, like you said, energy or entities or whatever this is, it's being recorded more and more through like our digital equipment. My sister had a motion detector camera. She works in IT and her whole house is wired, but she had one setting in the kitchen, and it kept going off, and it would send text. Like she would get a text, there's movement in the kitchen, but she would get these in the middle of the night. And she was like, this is crazy. It's malfunctioning. They unplugged it. They didn't move it. They just unplugged it. And that night they still got text messages. So they took that thing and threw it away.
Well, my next one is a true story. And I think this is where we're going to be next year. So listen to the story.
Oh, cool.
This is a local one, right?
Yeah, this is from North Carolina.
Nice.
So this is going to be one that we're going to take with us and go and investigate.
Go and investigate.
Right. It was early morning. The passengers were grumpy and heavy-eyed as they boarded the train in Salisbury, North Carolina during the early morning of August the 27th, 1891.
Wow. Long time ago.
The train was heading to Asheville, and the riders all took their seats and tried to catch a few more minutes of sleep before they arrived in Asheville. Around 3 a.m., the passengers were suddenly awakened by a sudden buckling and rocking of the train. The engineer fought to control the passenger train, but it raced across the stones and brick of the Boston Bridge near Statesville, North Carolina. But the train suddenly derailed. It tugged and boosted and caught fire and started running down a hill and then fell down a large embankment, falling down into a crevice, and it finally ended up in the water in the creek down way below. 22 people were killed that night in the worst train wreck in the history of North Carolina back in the 1800s. 50 years to the day after the wreck, a woman waiting by her stranded car, she had a flat tire near the Bostonian Bridge in Statesville, North Carolina. And it was the early morning hours of August 27th, and she saw a train coming rushing down the track, its headlight gleaming brightly in the darkness and the whistle blowing. As it raced across the bridge, it suddenly derailed, screaming its way down and down the embankment into the creek below. The woman was terrified. She ran toward the wrecked train and gasped down and gazed down into the creek. She heard cries and screams from the moans of the survivors. At that moment, a car pulled up beside her stranded vehicle, and her husband jumped out, followed by the owner of a local store who had come to help fix her tire. She ran towards them in a frantic, desperately telling them what she just saw. When they heard her story, the men ran to the edge and looked down into the creek bed. There was nothing there. The woman had seen the train wreck of the fateful encounter before her eyes, which took place on August 27th, 1981. People say that the phantom train appears once each year during the early morning hours of August the 27th, and it wrecks before their very eyes. Back in August the 27th, 2010, a man and his girlfriend decided they wanted to go see this legend. So they go and get on the tracks, and they're waiting for the train to arrive when a real train came by, killing the husband and seriously injuring the woman. So the moral of the story is, if you're going to wait and watch for this train wreck, don't get on the bridge.
Mm.
So that's a story that's supposed to be a real story, and we can we'll check that out.
Yeah.
So August the
27th.
At about 3 a.m., we're going to have to sit near the bridge, not on the bridge.
Not on the bridge.
Near the bridge to check this story out.
And listening for the screams.
We still need to check out the Lydia's Bridge in Jamestown.
Yeah.
That goes to Vannie L. Jackson.
Now, you do know that road is no longer exists, so we have to get out in the field. That bridge is out in the middle of a field now. So that's the reason that most people say that she hasn't been seen in the last few years, because the road is no longer in service. So we need to check that out too. So she's probably still wandering around out there somewhere trying to find her way home.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. That's our entertainment for tonight. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. We hope that you will stay tuned and listen for our next one. So while Halloween is coming upon us, we hope you enjoy the season.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy Halloween, guys.
From Darrell
and Amanda
and Bruce.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Good night.